My name is Rachel Martinez, and at 28 I've learned that sometimes the people who abandon you become the same ones begging for your forgiveness when they need you most. 3 weeks ago, I received a frantic call from my dying father, the same man who walked away when I was 12, taking my brother while my mother grabbed my sister, leaving me to navigate the foster care system alone. Now, with his business empire crumbling and my successful tech company making headlines, suddenly I'm the daughter he remembers. But here's the thing about being abandoned: it teaches you that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and sometimes the family you choose is worth more than the one that chose to leave you behind. Before we dive into this story of family betrayal and ultimate justice, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Have you ever felt completely abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect you? Hit that like button if you're ready for a story about how karma has a way of coming full circle. And don't forget to subscribe, because this family revenge drama is just getting started. The day my family fell apart started like any other Tuesday morning in suburban Phoenix. I was 12, braiding my little sister Emma's hair while my 9-year-old brother Jake complained about his math homework. Mom was in the kitchen making coffee, and Dad was already dressed for work in one of his expensive suits. Back then, he owned 3 successful construction companies across Arizona. What I didn't know was that my parents had been meeting with divorce lawyers for months, quietly dividing not just assets, but us kids like we were property to be distributed. The custody arrangement they'd worked out behind closed doors was something no child should ever have to experience, but it perfectly reflected who my parents really were underneath their carefully constructed facades. The explosion came that evening. I remember walking into the living room to find suitcases packed, and both parents sitting us down with forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Dad cleared his throat and launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech about new chapters and difficult decisions. Mom kept dabbing at her eyes with tissues, but I noticed she'd already removed her wedding ring. "Emma will be coming with me to California," Mom announced, reaching for my sister's hand. "There's a wonderful school district there, and she'll love being near the beach." Emma, only 7, looked confused, but excited at the mention of the beach. "And Jake, you're going to come live with Dad in his new place," Dad added, ruffling my brother's hair. "We'll have so much fun, buddy. There's even a pool." I sat there waiting for them to mention my name to tell me which parent I'd be going with. The silence stretched on until I finally asked the question that would haunt me for years: "What about me?" My parents exchanged a look, one of those loaded glances that adults think kids don't notice. Mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Well, Rachel, you're at such a difficult age, and with the divorce being so complicated." Dad jumped in his voice, taking on that businessman tone he used when he was trying to close a deal he wasn't proud of. "We think it would be best if you stayed with Aunt Linda for a while, just until things settle down." Aunt Linda, my mom's sister, lived 3 states away in a cramped apartment and could barely take care of herself, let alone a traumatized 12-year-old. But what crushed me wasn't just the logistics, it was the realization that neither parent wanted me enough to fight for me. "This is temporary," Mom insisted, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Just a few months until we get settled." Those few months turned into 6. Aunt Linda, overwhelmed and dealing with her own addiction issues, couldn't handle a grieving preteen. When she called social services, she told them my parents had abandoned me. Technically, that wasn't true. They were sending money for my care, but emotionally, it was the most accurate description possible. I entered the foster care system on a cold February morning, carrying everything I owned in a black garbage bag. My caseworker, Mrs. Rodriguez, was kind but overworked, managing dozens of cases like mine. She explained that my parents would need to petition the court to get me back to prove they could provide a stable home. Neither of them ever did. The first foster home was with the Johnsons, a religious family who meant well but treated me more like a charity project than a daughter. I lasted 8 months there before aging out to the Williamses, who were primarily interested in the monthly check from the state. Each placement felt like another confirmation that I was unwanted, disposable. Meanwhile, my siblings thrived in their new lives. Emma started taking dance classes and sent me photos of herself on California beaches looking tanned and happy with Mom and her new boyfriend. Jake joined Little League and posted videos online of Dad cheering him on from the bleachers, both of them wearing matching team jerseys. I watched their lives unfold through social media like I was viewing someone else's family. Birthday parties I wasn't invited to. Christmas mornings around trees I didn't help decorate. Family vacations to places I'd only ever see in their photos. The worst part wasn't the material things I missed, it was the way they all seemed to forget I existed. No phone calls on my birthday. No letters asking how I was adjusting. When Emma lost her first tooth, she called Dad to tell him. When Jake scored his first goal, he called Mom. But neither of them ever called me. By the time I turned 16 and was placed with the Garcias, my final and best foster family, I'd learned to stop expecting anything from my biological family. Maria and Carlos Garcia taught me what unconditional love looked like, supporting my dreams of studying computer science and treating me like I belonged. They couldn't officially adopt me due to legal complications, with my parents still having partial rights, but they gave me something more valuable. They showed me that family isn't about blood, it's about choice. The Garcias saved my life in ways they'll never fully understand. Maria, a high school math teacher, recognized my talent with computers and encouraged me to take advanced programming courses. Carlos, who worked in IT for a local hospital, brought home old computers for me to tinker with and rebuild. Their small house became the launching pad for everything I would eventually accomplish. While my biological family continued their separate lives, I threw myself into technology with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Late nights, coding became my escape, my therapy, my way of building something that couldn't be taken away from me. I learned Python, JavaScript, and C++ through online tutorials and library books, teaching myself skills that my peers wouldn't encounter until college. My high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Chen, helped me apply for scholarships and college programs. Despite having no financial support from my parents, they claimed supporting my foster care placement absolved them of additional responsibilities. I managed to piece together enough funding to attend Arizona State University's computer science program. College was where everything changed. My freshman year roommate David Kim was a business major with big dreams and a trust fund to match. We'd spend hours in our dorm room brainstorming app ideas and discussing the tech startups making headlines. While other students were partying, we were building prototypes and pitching to anyone who would listen. The idea that launched my career came from my own trauma. I'd struggled for years to navigate the foster care system's bureaucracy, often losing important documents or missing appointments because information was scattered across multiple agencies. I created a digital platform that streamlined communication between foster families, social workers, and children in care. Foster Connect started as my senior project, but David saw its commercial potential. We launched the app during our junior year, initially targeting Arizona's Department of Child Safety. The response was overwhelming. Caseworkers loved the efficiency, foster families appreciated the clear communication, and, most importantly, kids in the system finally had a voice in their own care. By graduation, Foster Connect was being used in 12 states. TechCrunch featured us in their Startups to Watch section, and venture capital firms started reaching out. David handled the business side while I focused on development, constantly improving the platform based on user feedback. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was building a company designed to help kids like I'd been, while my own family remained completely absent from my success. Not one of them reached out when we made national news. Not when Forbes named me to their 30 under 30 list. Not even when we secured our Series B funding, valuing the company at $50 million. I watched from afar as my siblings graduated high school, started college, and began their own careers. Emma became an Instagram influencer in LA, posting sponsored content about beauty products and beach workouts. Jake followed Dad into construction, taking a management position at one of the family companies straight out of college. Their lives seemed effortless, supported by parents who provided everything from down payments on cars to connections for internships. Meanwhile, I was building my empire from nothing, driven by a hunger they'd never understand because they'd never truly been hungry. The day we launched Foster Connect 2, a comprehensive platform that included educational resources, mental health support, and career guidance, I finally allowed myself to feel proud. Not just of the technology, but of the journey that brought me here. Every placement that didn't work out, every birthday spent with strangers, every night I'd cried myself to sleep feeling unwanted, it all led to this moment where I was helping thousands of kids who felt exactly like I had. Maria and Carlos were in the front row at our product launch event, beaming with pride as I delivered the keynote speech. They were my family, now the people who'd chosen to love me when everyone else had chosen to leave. The Garcias had taught me that success isn't just about what you build, it's about who you become in the process. But success has a way of attracting attention from people who previously ignored you, and I was about to learn that my biological family had been keeping closer tabs on my achievements than I'd ever imagined. They'd just been waiting for the right moment to re-emerge in my life. A moment when they needed something only I could provide. The call came on a Tuesday evening, exactly 16 years after that first Tuesday when my family imploded. I was in my home office in Scottsdale reviewing code for our latest update when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Normally I'd let unknown calls go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Rachel, it's your father. His voice was different, smaller, somehow lacking the confident boom I remembered from childhood. For a moment I couldn't speak. 16 years of silence. And this was how he chose to break it. With a casual phone call, like we'd just talked yesterday. What do you want? The words came out colder than I'd intended, but I wasn't going to pretend this was a happy reunion. I need to see you. It's important. About the family. He paused, and I could hear him struggling with whatever came next. I'm sick, Rachel. Really sick. And there are things you need to know about why. About what happened when you were 12. The rational part of my mind screamed to hang up. This man had abandoned me, left me to navigate the foster system while he played happy families with my brother. But there was something in his voice, a desperation I'd never heard before that made me hesitate. You have cancer, I said. It wasn't a question. I'd already Googled him during our conversation, finding news articles about his companies facing bankruptcy and a recent hospitalization. Pancreatic. 6 months, maybe less. His voice cracked slightly. Look, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but there's money involved. A lot of money. And your mother. She's been lying about something for 16 years. Something that changes everything. Against every instinct telling me to protect myself, I agreed to meet him the next day at a coffee shop in Central Phoenix. I spent the entire night pacing my apartment, alternating between fury and curiosity. What could he possibly tell me that would justify 16 years of abandonment? The man who walked into the coffee shop barely resembled the powerful businessman from my childhood memories. Dad had always been stocky and imposing, but cancer had whittled him down to a skeletal frame. His expensive suits were replaced by a simple polo shirt that hung loosely on his diminished frame. We sat across from each other in uncomfortable silence before he finally spoke. You look successful, happy. There was genuine surprise in his voice, as if he'd expected to find me broken by his abandonment. No thanks to you, I replied, not ready to make this easy for him. He nodded, accepting the blow. You have every right to hate me, Rachel. What we did to you was unforgivable. But I need you to understand the custody arrangement wasn't what either of us actually wanted. I laughed bitterly. Right. You both accidentally ended up with the kids you preferred and accidentally left me behind. That's not what happened. He pulled out a manila envelope, thick with documents. Your mother was blackmailing me. The words hit me like a physical blow. What she found out about my affair, the one that ended our marriage, and she had photos, recordings, everything. She threatened to destroy my business to take the kids away permanently unless I agreed to her custody terms. His hands shook as he opened the envelope. She demanded Emma. Said girls needed their mothers. And she insisted that you go into temporary care. Why? The word barely came out as a whisper. Dad's face crumpled with shame. Because you were the smart one, Rachel. Even at 12, you asked too many questions, noticed too many details. Your mother was planning something and she couldn't have you around to witness it. He spread documents across the table, bank statements, legal papers, private investigator reports. She was embezzling from my companies, funneling money through fake vendors into offshore accounts. Over the course of our marriage, she stole nearly $3 million. My world tilted sideways. You knew this and did nothing, I suspected, but I couldn't prove it until recently, and by then, he gestured helplessly. By then, you were gone and I convinced myself that you were better off without us. That was my greatest cowardice, Rachel. I let guilt and shame keep me from fighting for you. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too airless. Why are you telling me this now? Because she's coming for your company. The statement was so absurd, I almost laughed. What? Your mother has been monitoring your success for years. She's hired lawyers claiming that, as your biological parent, she has rights to your assets if something happens to you. She's also spreading rumors in business circles that Foster Connect was built using stolen technology from my companies. He slid another document toward me. She's filed papers claiming that since you lived in foster care on her dime, she kept paying the state for your support. You legally owe her a percentage of any business profits. I stared at the legal documents, feeling that familiar foster kid panic rising in my chest. Just when I thought I was safe, when I'd built something that couldn't be taken away, here was proof that nothing was ever really secure. There's more, Dad continued grimly. She convinced your siblings that you've been deliberately keeping them out of your life, out of spite. They think you're the one who's been cold and distant all these years. They never tried to contact me, I protested, but even as I said it, doubt crept in. She intercepted communications, changed phone numbers, told them you'd asked not to be contacted because seeing them was too painful. He pulled out printed emails and text messages. Jake tried to reach you dozens of times through social media and your company. Emma sent letters to your last known address. Your mother made sure you never got any of it. The revelation hit me like a tsunami. For 16 years, I'd believed my siblings had simply forgotten about me, that I'd been erased from their lives as completely as I'd been erased from my parents' custody arrangement. But they'd been trying to find me, and my mother had been systematically sabotaging every attempt. She's been playing the long game, Dad said quietly, keeping you isolated while positioning herself to claim your success when the time was right. The only reason I'm telling you this now is because I'm dying, and I can't let her destroy another one of my children. I sat there processing the magnitude of his revelations, feeling anger and grief and something else, a strange sense of relief. I wasn't unwanted. I wasn't forgotten. I was strategically removed by a master manipulator who saw me as a threat to her plans. What do you want from me? I asked finally. Help me prove what she did. Help me make sure she can't hurt you or your siblings anymore. And maybe, his voice broke slightly, maybe let me try to be your father, for whatever time I have left. The man across from me was dying, possibly lying, definitely desperate. But for the first time in 16 years, someone from my biological family was offering me the truth instead of abandonment. The question was I brave enough to trust him? Before we dive deeper into this family conspiracy that's about to explode, I have to ask, have you ever discovered that everything you believed about your past was built on lies? Drop a sectamin S. Comment below about a time when the truth completely changed your perspective. And if you're invested in finding out how I'm going to handle my mother's manipulation, hit that subscribe button, because the revenge I'm planning is going to be absolutely epic. I didn't trust my father, how could I after 16 years of abandonment? But I trusted evidence, and the documents he'd shown me were compelling enough to warrant investigation. That evening, I called David, my business partner and the closest thing I had to a brother. You want to hire a private investigator to dig into your own family? David's voice carried a mix of concern and disbelief. Rachel, this sounds like it could blow up in your face. It already blew up, I replied, spreading Dad's documents across my kitchen table. 16 years ago, I'm just finally getting the real story. We hired Jennifer Walsh, a former FBI agent who specialized in financial crimes and family law. Within a week, she'd uncovered a pattern of deception that made my father's revelations look like the tip of an iceberg. Your mother is a piece of work, Jennifer said during our first official meeting. She's been running cons since before you were born. 3 previous marriages, all ending with mysterious financial losses for her ex-husbands. She didn't just steal from your father's companies, she's been systematically destroying anyone who gets in her way. The evidence was staggering. Mom had indeed intercepted communications between me and my siblings for years. She'd set up fake email accounts, rerouted mail, and even created false social media profiles to monitor my online presence. Every birthday card Emma had sent, every invitation to Jake's games, Mom had collected them like trophies of her successful manipulation. She's been telling your siblings that you sued for emancipation specifically to cut them out of your life, Jennifer continued. She showed them forged legal documents claiming you'd legally disowned the family and requested no contact. I stared at copies of those forged documents, feeling sick. My brother and sister had spent 16 years believing I'd actively rejected them. No wonder they never pushed harder to find me, they thought I didn't want to be found. There's more, Jennifer said, pulling out her laptop. Your mother's been building a case against your company for the past 2 years. She's hired a team of lawyers and prepared extensive documentation, claiming that Foster Connect violates intellectual property belonging to your father's companies. That's impossible. I built Foster Connect from scratch, based on my own experiences in foster care. I know that and you know that, but your mother has created a compelling narrative. She's claiming that your father's construction companies had proprietary software for managing subcontractors and communication software that she says you had access to as a child and used as the foundation for Foster Connect. The audacity was breathtaking. My mother was essentially arguing that my childhood trauma had given me inside information that I'd later used to steal from my father. It was brilliant in its cruelty, turning my greatest pain into evidence of my supposed greed. She's also been spreading rumors in tech circles, Jennifer continued. Anonymous tips to journalists about potential ethics violations, questions about your company's funding sources, suggestions that your success story is too good to be true. I'd noticed some negative coverage lately, hit pieces questioning whether Foster Connect was just a vanity project by someone who'd never really experienced systemic poverty. Articles suggesting that my rags to riches story was exaggerated. I'd assumed it was routine corporate jealousy, but it was actually my mother systematically trying to undermine my reputation. Why now, I asked. If she's been planning this for years, why make her move now? Because your company is going public next year, Jennifer said. Once Foster Connect becomes a publicly traded company, your personal net worth will be in the hundreds of millions. She wants to establish legal claims before that happens. The pattern was becoming clear. My mother hadn't abandoned me, she'd strategically positioned me. Keeping me isolated ensured I'd be motivated to succeed out of desperation and trauma. Preventing contact with my siblings meant they couldn't provide emotional support that might make me less driven. And now, just as my success was about to peak, she was swooping in to claim her percentage. She's been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, I murmured. Exactly. But here's the thing about long-term cons, Jennifer smiled grimly. They require maintaining a lot of lies simultaneously. And your mother has been sloppy about covering her tracks. Over the following weeks, Jennifer's investigation revealed the full scope of my mother's deception. She'd been filing false tax returns claiming me as a dependent while I was in foster care to get additional deductions. She'd taken out credit cards in my name when I turned 18, damaging my credit score for years. Most damning of all, she'd been intercepting and forging correspondence from my siblings for over a decade. We have her on mail fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, and conspiracy, Jennifer explained. But the family manipulation stuff is harder to prosecute. What she did to you psychologically was devastating, but most of it wasn't technically illegal. That's when I realized something important. I didn't want her prosecuted. I wanted something better than legal justice. I wanted her to experience exactly what she'd put me through. I wanted her to be isolated, abandoned, and stripped of the family connections she'd weaponized against me. I need to talk to Jake and Emma, I told Jennifer. But not yet. First, I need to set a trap. My plan was elegant in its simplicity. If my mother was monitoring my success and planning to strike when Foster Connect went public, I'd give her the perfect opportunity. I scheduled a press conference to announce our IPO timeline, deliberately leaking information about the expected valuation. I wanted her to think she was about to hit the jackpot. Meanwhile, Jennifer was quietly gathering evidence and preparing documentation that would expose every lie my mother had told. We created a timeline of deception spanning 20 years, complete with bank records, forged documents, and intercepted communications. The hardest part was reaching out to my siblings without alerting my mother. Jennifer helped me create secure communication channels and verified that Jake and Emma were still the same people I remembered, just older and shaped by years of believing their sister had rejected them. The first message I sent to Emma was simple: I never forgot about you, and I never stopped loving you. We need to talk, but not through Mom. Here's my real number. Her response came within hours. Rachel, is this really you? I've been trying to find you for so long. Jake's reaction was even more emotional. I thought you hated us. Mom said you blamed us for the divorce. As we began to reconnect through encrypted messages and video calls, the full tragedy of our separation became clear. We'd all been mourning the loss of each other while our mother actively prevented our reunion. She'd stolen 16 years of sibling relationships to protect her long-term financial scheme. But she'd made one crucial mistake: she'd underestimated how much I'd grown during those 16 years of forced independence. The scared 12-year-old who'd been removed from her family was gone. In her place was a successful businesswoman with resources, connections, and a very clear understanding of how to fight back. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for my mother to walk into it. My mother requested a meeting 3 days after the IPO announcement hit the financial news. She'd seen the projected valuations, $750 million, for a company she'd claimed was built on stolen technology, and couldn't resist making her move. We agreed to meet at her lawyer's office in Scottsdale, a power play designed to intimidate me with legal authority. I arrived with Jennifer and David carrying a briefcase full of evidence that would destroy her carefully constructed narrative. But I also brought something else, a live video feed that would broadcast our conversation to Jake and Emma, who were watching from their respective locations in Denver and Los Angeles. It was time for my siblings to see exactly who our mother really was. Mom looked exactly like I remembered, just older. She'd maintained her appearance with the kind of precision that comes from years of manipulating others through charm and beauty. Her lawyer, Richard Brennan, was clearly expensive, the kind of attorney who specialized in high-stakes family financial disputes. Rachel, she smiled, standing to embrace me like we'd had lunch last week, instead of no contact for 16 years. You look wonderful. So successful. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. I stepped back from her attempted hug, keeping my expression neutral. Let's skip the pleasantries. What do you want? Brennan cleared his throat and launched into a prepared statement about family obligations and legal precedents. The gist was simple: as my biological mother, she had legal standing to claim a portion of my assets, particularly since Foster Connect allegedly incorporated intellectual property from my father's companies. I'm not here to be greedy, Mom said, her voice taking on that wounded tone I remembered from childhood arguments. I just want what's fair. Raising children is expensive, and the money I spent supporting you in foster care should be considered an investment in your future success. How much? I asked bluntly. 30% of your current net worth, plus 20% of future earnings from Foster Connect, Brennan replied. Given the circumstances of your upbringing and the family resources that contributed to your success, we believe this is quite reasonable. I almost laughed. She wanted approximately $200 million, based on her version of events, where she was the devoted mother who'd sacrificed to support my care, and I was the ungrateful daughter who'd stolen family resources to build my empire. That's an interesting story, I said, opening my briefcase. But I have a different version of events. I started with the bank records showing her embezzlement from Dad's companies, then moved to the forged documents she'd used to keep me away from Jake and Emma. Finally, I pulled out the intercepted letters and emails, 16 years of communication from my siblings that she'd deliberately hidden from me. This is interesting, I said, holding up a birthday card from Emma's 13th birthday. My sister wrote that she missed me and wanted me to come visit for her birthday party. She addressed it to my last known foster home, and even included a photo of herself so I'd recognize how much she'd grown. I looked directly at my mother. Where do you think I was on Emma's 13th birthday? Mom's composure was beginning to crack. Rachel, you're taking those out of context. I was in my 4th foster placement, I continued. The Hendersons. They were kind people, but they couldn't afford birthday presents for foster kids. I spent that day wondering if my little sister even remembered my name, while she was actually begging you to help her find me. I turned to Jake's letters next. And here's one from Jake when he made varsity baseball. He wanted to invite me to his games. He wrote, I know Rachel probably doesn't care about my stupid sports, but I miss having a big sister to impress. Brennan was frantically taking notes, clearly realizing his client had lied about virtually everything. But I wasn't done. The really beautiful part is this, I said, pulling out Jennifer's investigative report. You've been monitoring my success for years, waiting for exactly this moment. You knew Foster Connect was going public, and you timed this lawsuit to maximize your payday. This isn't about family or fairness, it's about money. It's always been about money. Mom's mask finally slipped completely. You ungrateful little bitch, she snarled. I gave you the motivation you needed to succeed. If we'd kept you, you'd be just another entitled brat working a mediocre job and living off family money. I made you strong. You made me an orphan while my parents were still alive, I replied calmly. But you're right about one thing, you did make me strong. Strong enough to see through your manipulation, and strong enough to make sure you never hurt anyone in this family again. I pulled out my phone and showed her the live video feed. Say hello to Jake and Emma. They've been listening to this entire conversation. The color drained from her face as she realized my siblings had just heard her admit to 16 years of deliberate manipulation. They'd heard her call me ungrateful for not thanking her for my abandonment. They'd seen the evidence of all the communications she'd intercepted and the lies she'd told. You recorded this illegally, Brennan protested. Arizona is a one-party consent state, Jennifer replied smoothly. And since Rachel consented to the recording, everything you've said here is admissible in court. But I had no intention of taking this to court. I had something much better planned. Here's what's going to happen, I said, standing up. You're going to withdraw your lawsuit and never contact me, my siblings, or my company again. In exchange, I won't press charges for mail fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, or the emotional abuse of 3 children. And if I refuse, Mom asked, though her voice had lost all its earlier confidence, then I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are, I replied. Every future Mark you try to con, every new husband you attempt to manipulate, every business relationship you try to build, they'll all get a very detailed dossier about your methods. I'll make it impossible for you to reinvent yourself again. I handed her a business card. You have 24 hours to decide. Choose wisely. As we left the office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 16 years: complete victory. Not just legal or financial victory, but emotional justice. My mother had spent decades orchestrating elaborate manipulations to control and profit from her family. Now, she was about to experience what it felt like to be truly alone. The aftermath of our confrontation moved faster than I'd expected. Within 12 hours, my mother's lawyer called to withdraw the lawsuit. Within 24 hours, Jake and Emma were on planes to Phoenix for our first real family reunion in 16 years. I picked them up at the airport with a mixture of excitement and terror. These were my siblings, but they were also strangers, adults shaped by experiences I hadn't shared. Emma was 23, now tall and confident with our mother's sharp features but Dad's kind eyes. Jake was 25, broader than I remembered, but still carrying himself with that shy smile I'd loved when he was 9. The moment we saw each other, 16 years of separation collapsed into nothing. Emma burst into tears and threw her arms around me, while Jake stood awkwardly to the side until I pulled him into our group hug. I can't believe she did all that, Emma whispered, her voice muffled against my shoulder. All those years, I thought you didn't want anything to do with us. I thought the same thing about you, I replied, holding both of them tight. She played us all. We spent 3 days together in Phoenix, slowly rebuilding relationships that had been severed by our mother's manipulation. I showed them the foster homes where I'd lived, introduced them to the Garcias, and walked them through the journey that had led to Foster Connect's success. Jake was fascinated by the technology, immediately understanding the impact our platform was having on kids in care. "You built something that could have helped you when you needed it most," he said during a tour of our offices. "That's incredible, Rach." Emma was more emotional about everything, frequently breaking into tears as she processed the magnitude of what our mother had done. "She stole our sister," she kept saying. "She stole 16 years of having our sister." But it was our father's response that surprised me most. Dad had been monitoring the situation from the hospital, where his cancer treatment was becoming increasingly aggressive. When he learned about our reunion, he asked if he could see all three of us together. I wasn't ready to forgive him. His role in my abandonment was real, regardless of Mom's manipulation, but I was curious enough to agree. We met at the hospital on a Tuesday evening, exactly 1 week after his initial call to me. Dad looked even worse than before, but his eyes lit up when he saw the three of us walk into his room together. "My children," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. I never thought I'd see my children together again. Jake and Emma were emotional, but they'd maintained relationships with Dad throughout the years. For me, this was more complicated. This man had chosen business calculations over fighting for his daughter, and no amount of regret could change that. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness," Dad said, looking directly at me. "But I need you to know that not a day has passed that I haven't regretted my cowardice. I let fear and shame keep me from fighting for you, and that's on me. Not your mother. Me." It wasn't absolution, but it was accountability. For the first time, someone was taking responsibility for their role in my abandonment without trying to excuse it or blame external circumstances. "I've been working on something," he continued, gesturing to a stack of legal documents on his bedside table. "My will has been updated. Everything, the companies, the properties, the investments, it's being split equally among the three of you. But Rachel gets an additional bequest." He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a letter detailing every instance of embezzlement he'd discovered, along with evidence that would allow me to recover the stolen funds if I chose to pursue them. But more importantly, it contained a full confession of his failures as a father, and a detailed timeline of events that would serve as permanent documentation of what really happened during my childhood. "I can't give you back your childhood," he said quietly. "But I can make sure the truth is preserved, and that you have the resources to help other kids who are going through what you went through." Dad died 6 weeks later. The funeral was surreal, a gathering of business associates and family friends who had no idea about the drama that had shaped our family for decades. My mother attended, playing the role of grieving widow, while carefully avoiding any interaction with me or my siblings. We buried him on a Thursday afternoon in December, standing together as the family we should have been all along. Emma held my hand during the service, and Jake kept checking to make sure I was okay. They were protecting me the way siblings should, making up for 16 years of missed opportunities. The reading of the will was even more satisfying than I'd anticipated. Dad had been thorough in his documentation, ensuring that my mother couldn't contest the distribution of assets. She received exactly what Arizona law required for a surviving spouse, and nothing more. The rest was divided equally among his children, with my additional bequest being substantial enough to fund Foster Connect's expansion into all 50 states. But the real victory wasn't financial, it was seeing my mother's face as she realized her long-term con had completely backfired. Instead of gaining access to my wealth, she'd lost her husband, her children, and her primary source of financial support. She left the lawyer's office alone, exactly as she'd left me 16 years earlier. Foster Connect went public 6 months after Dad's death. The IPO was even more successful than projected, valuing the company at $1.2 billion and making me one of the youngest female billionaires in tech. But more importantly, we'd helped over 1,000,000 kids navigate the foster care system and had partnerships with agencies in 38 states. Emma quit her influencer career to join Foster Connect as our director of communications, using her social media skills to raise awareness about foster care issues. Jake left construction to head our expansion into group homes and residential facilities. We weren't just rebuilding our family, we were building something that would help other families stay together. The Garcias were in the front row at our IPO ceremony, beaming with pride as I rang the opening bell at NASDAQ. They were the family who'd chosen me when everyone else had given up, and they deserved to share in every moment of success that followed. My mother made one final attempt to re-enter our lives 2 years later, reaching out through intermediaries when she learned about Emma's engagement. She wanted to be included in the wedding, to play the role of mother of the bride for appearance's sake. Emma's response was perfect. I already have all the family I need. Standing in the venue where Emma married her college sweetheart, watching Jake walk her down the aisle because she'd asked him to, I finally understood what my mother had really stolen from us. It wasn't money or opportunities or even time, it was the simple joy of being wanted by the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally. But here's the beautiful irony in trying to profit from my trauma, she'd actually created the exact conditions that made me successful enough to take care of my siblings, and strong enough to build something meaningful from my pain. Her manipulation had backfired so completely that she'd engineered her own isolation while giving me everything I needed to thrive. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's building a life so good that your enemies become irrelevant. So here's my question for all of you watching. Have you ever experienced family karma this perfectly? When someone who hurt you ended up facing consequences that felt like cosmic justice? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, whether it's about family betrayal, workplace revenge, or just life giving someone exactly what they deserved. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to help others find it. So many people are dealing with family manipulation and toxic relationships, and they need to know they're not alone, and that it's possible to build something beautiful from the worst circumstances. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming impossible odds and finding justice when the system fails you. I share these experiences because I believe in the power of truth to heal both the storyteller and the people who need to hear that survival is possible. Finally, please share this video with anyone who might need to hear that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice, loyalty, and love that doesn't come with conditions. Some of the strongest families are the ones we build ourselves, from the people who choose to stay when things get difficult. Thank you for listening to my story, and for being part of this community where we support each other through life's most challenging moments. Remember, sometimes the family that abandons you is just making room for the family that will choose you. And that might be the greatest gift they ever accidentally give you.